This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Welcome to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Jason Rinsky. Jason, thank you for taking us on your career journey.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, before we find out what you're doing today, let's start at the very beginning. And can you tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I mean, other than the guy to take over behind the plate when the Reds' Johnny Bench retired, of course, right?
Well, that could be it. I like that.
Yeah. Tried hard, never quite achieved that level of stardom, of course. But, you know, honestly, I really didn't have a dream job. If anything, I just wanted to do something that I could make a lot of money at. I knew I liked money. And, you know,
it's a good motivator, right?
Absolutely, right. Even at a young age, it was a very, very big motivator for me. You know, I had a lot of love and support at home growing up, but we didn't have a lot of extra things, and not that we went without any necessities, and it was a great childhood. But, you know, looking back, I guess, you know, a driver for me was not wanting to want and to ultimately get things that I saw other people had.
Wow. That is a big driver, though, especially if you don't come up with much. You're like, well, wow, what would it take to get X? So what was one of your first jobs as a little kid?
Yeah, did some of the grass cutting and had a very short-lived paper route. You know, I think I probably made more money going around collecting bottles for the deposit and ultimately picking up the old steel and aluminum cans and taking them once a week to the recycling semi that would come up to the shopping center and getting the 50 to 60 cents or so per pound. And, you know, that was the way I made money certainly as a young kid. But one thing that also stands out for me was working with my grandpa. He lived in Florida, and he would work the weekends at the flea market. And when I'd go visit, I'd get to work the stand with him.
Oh,
and,
cool.
you know, it was really cool. I mean, for lots of reasons. I mean, the part of it was not something I would have chosen. You know, we got up before dawn, which is not great when you're, you know, a kid, first off, and
Yep.
You're on vacation, second off. But, you know, I did this with him probably from starting at 9 or 10 years old. And, you know, it was great. We'd go to the storage locker, we'd pack up the station wagon and the trailer. And what I really recall most enjoying about it is that he treated me like an adult. You know, I had the apron with the money and, you know, wads of money, at least what felt like wads, I'm sure, to a kid at that time. And, you know, I was exposed to lots of different people and cultures and, you know, selling and bartering with them, the same as he was. And he paid me for it and paid me really well for it, actually. So that was a really great feeling to do that, and the money aspect was good, and it certainly, you know, outweighed literally and otherwise how many cans I would need to get in the street in order to make what I could with him in one weekend.
So what kind of products did you sell?
T-shirts, 3 for $10. Mahjong
You're at
sets.
the 3 for $10 booth. I've seen those many times at flea markets. Okay.
Absolutely. You know, he had socks, underwear, Mahjong sets, backgammon sets. I mean, whatever he could buy wholesale and felt like there was a market for, he'd buy it and we'd resell it.
That's awesome. I used to go to the flea market quite a bit with my dad, and I would always go to the coin vendor. I was a geeky little kid, had a coin collection, and that was my go-to. You know, I had to find that guy out and try to buy a little something or other. But we always went there looking for the deals. That was a lot of fun. Well, cool. Well, what was your first job? The one where you actually got a paycheck or had to fill out a W-2?
Yeah. When I turned 16, of course, I wanted a car. My mom said, well, if you want a car, go out and get a job. So I did. There was a Pizza Hut a couple blocks away, and started off as a cook, and then got into waiting tables there as well. And ultimately, I had other serving and bartending jobs throughout high school and college. But I actually kept a relationship with the Pizza Hut folks and worked all the way through college in some fashion, and that was always really great. You know, again, it was another kind of cash business where it was great walk out on a Saturday night with a couple $100 in your pocket. So that was a really nice score for a high school kid on a one night shift, and it really kind of made me think I'd never really want a job where I had to get up early or have to sit behind a desk, wear a suit and tie. and that kind of made an impression on me, frankly, at an early age as well.
Wow, that's a great layup for me. So tell us, what do you do today? And if you would, walk us through your career journey that got you there, including like any education you received and jobs that led you to today.
Actually, after I graduated college, I went and got my first real job, if you will, or salary job as a manager of a Boston Chicken, now Boston Market. And, kind of along that mindset of I didn't want to, get up early and do all the things that a traditional job would do. But I also quickly realized I also didn't want to be at the whim of a 16-year-old kid who decided or not to show up to wash dishes, and I'd be the one stuck there doing it half the night.
They do have great stuffing, though. I'll have to say that. Boston Market, great stuffing.
They do. They do. One of our standbys, if we're looking for a bring-along for food at a party, is the spinach dip and put it in a bread bowl. So we still go back to that on occasion. So what do I do today? I'm a franchise consultant. And ultimately, as a franchise consultant, I work with people who are interested in exploring whether business ownership is an option for them, and take them down a path of discovery using a number of different tools and processes to help them determine, A, is business ownership right for them? Because frankly, it's not for most people. And if it is, really help understand, get a feeling and a picture, a profile of who they are, what their experience has been, get an understanding of what business characteristics and traits they'd be looking for, what their goals are, what kind of money, of course, they need to make, and a lot of other factors, and ultimately look for what the best business model and vehicle for them would be. And through the franchise consultancy group that I'm aligned with, I have about 200 different franchise concepts that I have access to and can share those concepts with the person, again, based on their profile, their traits and characteristics, and introduce them to usually about a half dozen or so specific company concepts. And the goal would be for them to identify 2 or 3 that they'd want to learn more about. And at that point, the intent would be to have them I'd introduce them to a representative of the franchise company, and I'd help them down a path of discovery, helping them do the due diligence. The franchise world is full of lots of regulations. It's a very regulated field, and as such, there's a lot of documentation. There's a lot of information that must come. There's a lot of information that can't be shared in certain ways. So again, I help people through that navigating that process and learning and making sure that they're getting what they need, getting questions answered, and understanding if they were to be a business owner under that brand, what would it mean for them? What would it look like? What would the culture be? What would the role be for them? What's the exit strategy look like? And all the other factors to help them decide whether it's something that they want to move forward with and ultimately be a business owner under.
So before I ask my franchise questions, because I am fascinated with the business you have, I think it's amazing. But I have no idea how one of our listeners would get to do what you're doing right now. Could you walk through kind of your roles that led to that? And because it just seems like I could not even guess what you would have to do to get the experience you need to do what you're doing today.
Yeah, it's not a job or a profession most people even know about. In fact, when I tell people what I do, it usually then is followed up with an explanation of what a franchise consultant actually does. And, so there's not, in my opinion, not that I've seen anywhere, a traditional path that somebody would necessarily take to do what it is that I do. I think most people come out of one of 2 paths ultimately to get into the franchise consultancy world. One, they've been a business owner, particularly a franchise business owner. So they went through the process, they perhaps owned a business or 2, they exited the business, typically through a sale or the ending of the term of their franchise agreement, and they realized that they still want to be involved working with entrepreneurs, working in the business world, but they want to do so working with others as opposed to being a business owner themselves. And that's how some people get into it. The other is a lot of people go to work in the franchise industry in some sales capacity. We find that a lot of the people who are in development and ultimately in kind of a sales role, if you will, are people who are just really good salespeople. They're good relationship builders. They're people who can read people really well. They got to be honest. They've got to be able to assess people from a business acumen standpoint. But a lot of people start off at a pretty young age because the circuit can be difficult when you're a representative for one franchise organization. You're constantly off at from some franchise show or another, or franchise consultant brokerage conference or another. You're on the road visiting prospective owners or visiting with current owners. So, the lifestyle is one that tends to lead towards a younger professional. A lot of those folks because they are working for one brand, after a while decide whether it's the travel, whether it's just the hustle of it all, they decide, you know what, I'd like to be a consultant so I can be more rooted where I live, working in my community, and then I can represent hundreds of different concepts versus just the one. So those are the two primary roles that I see people coming out of who ultimately become franchise consultants.
Well, that's really cool. So as a franchise consultant, what is your week like? I know that's probably pretty broad, but can you kind of tell me, like a day in, day out, what are you working on?
Yeah, so a lot of networking. It's funny, my wife will jokingly rib me about the fact that I've never had a cup of coffee in my life, but I spend a good deal of time in coffee shops doing networking meetings and just having meetings with people. And so a lot of it is just building the network. It's going to either networking events, networking regular groups, doing a lot of one-on-one. I would say the best parts of my week, frankly, are when I'm actually one-on-one talking with somebody who's expressed some interest or expressed wanting to learn more about whether business ownership is right for them, and really diving in and going through the process and really understanding whether or not it would be a fit for them. And then once they get into that phase of working with and talking with specific franchisors, really helping them navigate that. And of course, the ultimate is, and it's not an every week and it's not even an every month scenario, frankly, but getting to that point where they decide this is for me, and then they get their business up and going and launch it. Obviously, that's the pinnacle.
Right. So let's do a little role play here. So say I walk up to you and I say, hey, I want your services. I'm looking at buying a Chick-fil-A, a Five Guys, or a Golden Corral. I don't know, just three different restaurants. Now, my assumption would be is you're like probably, hey, pump the brakes here, buddy. You know, maybe a restaurant owner is not even correct for you. Maybe you're looking at the wrong industry. Is that correct? Or do you kind of like go with what they're looking at, or do you take a broader scope across multiple different industries?
I think, based on what you just said, maybe we need to add a third way people get into it, and it's kind of being a podcast facilitator, right? Because, you're right on there. It's a lot of people come in with an assumption of what it is, and, the tagline that we use at our organization is more than just French fries. And, a lot of people come in with an assumption of what does it cost, or because I've come from the restaurant industry, then I, of course, need to open up a restaurant facility versus something else. And so, we really kind of take them back and really take them through that kind of process that we have. And I hate to call it a process, but it is, and so we really help people understand our acronym being four things, FATS, or the FATS, right? Is the funding in place? Because the reality is it takes money to start a business. Number two is the aptitude in place there, right? Because not everybody has the aptitude to be a business owner or can fit into a culture of a system, because a franchise is a proven, replicatable system, and not every entrepreneur is meant to be in that defined space. They want to go and do their own thing when they want to do it and not be subject to those parameters. The T in FATS is for timing. So somebody might make a great business owner, but the timing may not be right. And lastly, the S is for support, whether it's spousal or familial support. If somebody in the household isn't happy that the person isn't working for a steady paycheck or is putting the money or the household or the family at risk, it's not going to be a great success. So we kind of take people through that. We build out what those business characteristics and wants are. People have different drivers for wanting to be a business owner. It could be they were laid off one more time, and they no longer want to be subject to being laid off. They want to take control. People who have a passion for wanting to be a business owner, people who are looking to create that flexibility so they can go and be at their kids' games after school or not have to, worry about traveling as much. So, we really understand all of those attributes, and then we would align with the different concepts that we have and which ones match, whether it is in their previous experience line or not. Because at the end of the day, franchise companies are looking for business owners who can work on their business and not in their business. So prior experience, frankly, not only isn't it required, sometimes it's almost a detriment because they don't necessarily want to retrain on their processes and break bad habits.
Right. They can have kind of tunnel vision, like, well, this is what I've always done versus a bigger picture management aspect of it, I would assume.
Exactly.
Well, can you share with us a challenge or failure you faced, whether it's with your career or life experiences or business, and how you overcame it?
I'll call it a challenge. I certainly don't look at it as a failure. So, I first got involved in franchising back in the early 90s. And through some different experiences, had the opportunity to work for a couple of different franchisors where I was working with people who were interested in becoming a business owner for that one brand and then helping those owners support their business operations. After doing that, and a lot of that was in the staffing and recruiting industry, and after having the opportunity to work for a large organization, my wife and I had moved to Florida. We had been there for about 4 years, and this is coming out of the unfortunate 9/11 events. And in 2002, 2003, we saw that the economy was certainly getting a lot better, and that can be a really, really good time to be in the staffing industry. And I'm a Cincinnati guy, and it made sense that we were going to open up a business that we would do so back in Cincinnati. So the company I was with was a very mature, well-established organization, and they had locations pretty much everywhere in the country, and Cincinnati wasn't available through them. So I went out, sought what franchises were available in the staffing industry for Cincinnati, and I found a company out of California, and I won't go down and hash out all the details, but long story short, we were the third franchisee to sign on, and they stopped at number 4. And, they completely dismantled and got rid of the few people they had in their franchise operations department and, pretty well not only left us out on our own, but made it really clear they didn't want us. And we were the only franchisee that made it past, probably 9 months. And, we were doing fine and we were doing okay, but frankly, they made our lives pretty difficult, and we ultimately sold it back to them. And so, the challenge was during those years that we owned it in working with the owner of the parent organization and, the way that we were treated, the way that we were, kind of pressured to try and make decisions that were in his best interest, not necessarily in our best interest. But I also look back on that, and while it was a really challenging time, I look at it in 2 respects. One, I probably had a lot of hubris where there were some signs and warning signs there that I probably should have heeded versus looking at it and thinking, no, that's okay, I can overcome that. That's okay. It's not going to impact me or affect me like it may have other people. And so, I learned from that, and I'm much more, and I've continued, and it wasn't a flip of a switch, but, I've continued to grow in my acceptance of accepting feedback, asking for advice, and really taking it to heart and listening to it versus thinking that I always know best. But, at the end of the day, had I not had those experiences, it wouldn't have led me down the career path I ultimately took from there into where I am today.
It's interesting you say that because a lot of these interviews I found that even if their career path was really weird or different or challenging, most of the folks don't want to change it because they learned so much from those challenges or how they overcame that obstacle or the experience they picked up while they were going through it. So it sounds like you had the same kind of journey through that difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great to erase some of the struggle part from my memory banks, of course, but
right.
Again, what do they say? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and it's a true statement as far as I'm concerned.
That's awesome. Well, before we move on to our next question, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Do you enjoy your job and find it fulfilling? Or do you spend more time wondering what if instead of what's next? If so, contact Career Spa. Career Spa has extensive programs and curriculum and understands the challenges faced by individuals in transition. They can teach these success practices to be mastered for an effective job search. Answer that what if question by contacting Career Spa and asking their experts, what's next? Contact Career Spa at careerspa.net. Talent acquisition is key to building a successful organization. Talent Connections is a professional services firm that specializes in recruiting, including executive search, contract recruiting, talent acquisition consulting, and recruitment process outsourcing. Whether you are an individual or a Fortune 100 company, Talent Connections can connect you with success. Contact them at talentconnections.net. Welcome back. We just learned what you wanted to be when you grew up, which was the replacement for Johnny Bench, right?
Yes.
And what you do today. So if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Thinking back, I'm not sure that there's really anything that I would do differently, to be honest. It's easy to look back and say, I could have done this, I could have accepted this job, I could have, whatever the decision is, it's always easy in hindsight to look back. But to be honest, I can't think of a single decision that I've made that I would go back and say, you can think about the what ifs, but I'd go back and say, I would absolutely change that, or even more than a 50-50 that I would change that. I sincerely can't.
Wow, that's great, though. I mean, looking back, you don't have that many regrets, if any at all. So that's great. Well, if someone wants to do what you do, and you've touched on this a little bit, what advice would you give them?
First off, I think start off in any role you can get in. If you want to be in the franchising business, find a franchisor and take whatever job is available to you. If it's entry level, if it's administrative, if it's even working in one of the operations of the franchisor, that is the best way to get the foot in the door. Learn the operation from the ground up, first off, but also ingratiate yourself, show the traits and the characteristics that you bring, show the work ethic that you have, and ultimately that's what will allow you to move up in the ranks and to have the patience to do that. Not everything is going to happen in weeks or months. Sometimes it's a long game, and it may seem like an eternity when you're in the middle of it, but when you look back, a year here or there over the course of a career and a life isn't really that much time.
And I'm assuming you would have to really save your pennies, right? I mean, you're talking about a pretty significant investment off the bat, aren't you?
Well, if you're talking about starting a franchise, I guess I was really coming at it in terms of being a franchise consultant, which essentially I am a business.
Yep.
But in some ways it's very much the same because I am a business owner. It doesn't come with a paycheck, and so I'm only compensated when I'm able to help somebody connect with a franchisor, and so it's also a good piece of advice to save the pennies if you want to be a franchise consultant as well.
Are there any current projects you're working on that you'd like to share?
It's an interesting business because it's a continuous cycle. And, I'm always starting with somebody. I'm always in varying stages of the process with other people. And so, there's nothing from a big professional project-related aspect that I would say yes. I guess if I had anything along that line, it's probably be more on the personal side, just really, an avid traveler. My wife and I love to get out and see the world and visit as many countries and particularly ports that we possibly can. So that'd be the big project we're working on right now.
That's awesome. Sounds like you love the water like I do.
Absolutely. Put me on a cruise ship and I am very happy.
Well, speaking of journeys, including a cruise ship journey, as with most journeys, success largely depends on reliable transportation. I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm a huge car enthusiast. Love the old cars, the new cars. So in that vein, could you tell us, what was your first car?
My first car was a 1970 Chevy Chevelle. It was...
oh, that's serious.
Yeah, it was, it was a lot of horsepower for a 16-year-old kid. I think it was a 375, nice army green, had the bench seats. I remember I would often turn corners, and if I accelerated too quickly, a hubcap off one of the front tires would go shooting off to the side. So it was a great car. I loved that car.
How did you get that car? Were you after that car? Did your dad say, hey, here's a car for you? How'd that work out?
No, again, wanted a car and be driving around and this is well before you'd go to cars.com or look online, right? So either you're
right.
looking in the paper or you're just driving around, and there was a auto repair shop that would have cars out front and, for sale, and we drove by and took a look at it, and I think it was $600 is what it was at the time, right? And, yeah, so my grandpa had a mechanic that he recommended, and took it down and checked it out for me, and hey, there it was, my first car.
Wow. So what is your dream car?
Sorry, I know you're a car guy, but frankly, it's more of a utility to me.
That's
I
fine.
Really, yeah.
No condemnation here.
Thank you. And if there is, you can edit it out, right?
I'll edit it out.
Yeah, honestly, until the day comes when there's maybe solar panels that, are some kind of better renewable energy, for me, dream car is all about comfort and what it can do from that perspective. It's making me comfortable as I'm driving where I need to get and make sure it's reliable. That, to me, is the dream car these days.
So one great perk to some jobs is a company car. So I was going to pick you out a company car, and actually I did, but it goes totally against everything you just said. So I'm going to tell you what it was anyways. So I tried to base it on your job as a franchise consultant. So I thought, all right, what car companies have been bought and sold a few times, and it can quite be the mess. Well, the one I landed on, because it's a really cool car, is I decided if I had all the money in the world, your cool company car would be a Lamborghini Gallardo.
Uh-huh.
A couple reasons. You could drive it to the coffee store. You would network like crazy because everybody would come out and see, hey, what's this spaceship-looking cool car out here? So, and it was, Lamborghini used to be, their own. Then they were bought by Chrysler for a number of years, and then they went to Fiat, and they have like an Audi engine. I mean, they've been all over the place. So That's why I picked your car. But it's not reliable. It gets horrible gas mileage. It's not very comfortable. So if you need to turn it in for a refund, or let me drive it, then I'm good with that. So that's the car I would pick.
Very nice. Well, I kind of like the networking piece, because you're right. It would be a conversation starter. So I need to give some consideration to that next time.
Well, if nothing else, I do put a lot of thought into it. So, well, thank you so much for taking us on your journey. What is the best way our listeners can learn more about you and your company in case they want to buy their own franchise? Yeah,
absolutely. I appreciate you checking. So our website, you can learn more about the organization I'm with, which is called FranNet, and the website is FranNet Mid-America. So FRAN as in Nancy, NET, midamerica.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking us on your career journey today, Jason.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.